it's very important to try and understand Afghanistan in a regional context.
Right.
Often, I think the West looks at it as a struggle between fundamentalist Islam and America, between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda on one hand and the US on the other. The reality is that it's a regional conflict. The Pakistanis support the Taliban because they're terrified about Indian influence in Afghanistan. India is the forgotten element, or the forgotten corner in this triangle, if you like.
Right.
I've been told always by my British diplomat friends in Islamabad that Kayani will talk about nothing at the moment except India and Afghanistan. He's obsessed with Indian plots in Afghanistan, that the Secret Service, RAW, is sending insurgents down to Baluchistan. And this is something he literally obsesses about. This is what he's briefed about. This is what he's worrying about. Okay. And I think you've got to see it within the context with India. You've got to see it also with the context of China. China has bought up huge quantities of mineral rights all over Afghanistan.
Right.
And in a sense, one of the hopes for peace is that China will hold down, by investing hugely in minerals, in communications, in rail and road networks, that they will be able to succeed where we've all failed in keeping the Pakistanis and the Taliban in place. Because Pakistan depends on Chinese support, and they won't fall out with China.
Right.
It's a very crucial element in the story.
But America's not leaving, though, like we said.
Well, America is leaving in part. There are about 125,000 troops in America now. They will leave only 25 to 30,000. We don't know the exact number, which is a small force. Certainly, though, it's probably about equal to the size of the Taliban. There are no more than 25 to 30,000 Taliban. There are no accurate figures, of course, and they come and go. But and many of it's sort of amateurs taking a pot shot, coming over the border or whatever.
Well, that's what by my informants as well, the CSA, they've not been able to make any kind of a big dent.
To compare with that, there were probably around 300,000 Mujahideen fighting the Soviets. There are about 25,000 Taliban only. I think America has been able to, and the international community have been able to create a much wider Afghan coalition than the Soviets managed. There was only a very small number of pro-Soviets in Kabul, but there's this wide coalition. For example, all the Northerners who were fighting the Russians are very, very much behind behind ISAF in America.
Right. So, is there some semblance of an Afghan civil society now?
That's a very important question, and it's true.
You quote Adam Mirza from 150 years ago, 170 years ago. Is there another,
No, there is, and this has been.
Like
the failure of the West in Afghanistan was that they didn't build the hospitals, the schools, and the roads.
Right.
But almost despite that, having created a space for democratic government, Afghans have themselves seized the opportunities. Kabul has tripled in size since, I think even quadrupled in size since 2001. Jalalabad and Kandahar similarly. Even provincial towns like Farah are much bigger, and the younger generation are wired, they're on the internet, they're reading all the newspapers, seeing all the shows, and it's very difficult to imagine that world succumbing to the Taliban again. The Taliban remain a rural southern phenomena.
Right.
And I think while they can create a great deal of disruption and a great deal of violence, particularly if they're backed and armed, they cannot overrun the country in the way that they did in the late 80s.
And of course, they're at the negotiating table, right? In Doha and elsewhere with US and
Well, it comes and goes. They, I think, are prepared to negotiate. Karzai can't make up his mind whether he's willing to negotiate, whether he's willing to negotiate directly, which is what he wants, or whether through the Americans. So the whole thing is in an uneasy and unsettled place. But I think it's possible to imagine negotiations which were unlikely 5 years ago.
Now, in the book, you say that this battle, the first battle for Afghanistan, is Afghanistan's Yorktown.
Correct.
Or England's Trafalgar.
Trafalgar, yeah.
Trafalgar. And then you reference non-violent movement in India as in Gandhi's Salt March.
What I mean to say is that for the Afghans, they look back on this uprising of 1842 as their national liberation struggle. What Michael Collins was to the Easter Rising to the Irish, what Trafalgar or Waterloo was to the British, what Yorktown and Washington was to Americans, this is to the Afghans. Gandhi's perhaps a slightly less accurate comparison, because obviously he was non-violent, and this is very far from non-violent.
And given you know,
But it does have the same place, just like you see Gandhi on every note, every rupee note in India.
Right.
So Wazir Akbar Khan is remembered as the main diplomatic area in Kabul. They are the national heroes.